Yeah, and I think it's also a good precursor because a lot of the content that we got from Canada, I think it all starts with still having a sound like foundation to build on because there's a lot of things that they said that could be a little, deemed kind of like pessimistic or a little scary, but it's more of, do you have a solid plan for your overall wealth blueprint and what ultimately are you trying to accomplish? And so I think this conversation will be good as a building block for us to have a deeper conversation in a couple weeks and really go deep on some of the topics that were shared at that event. And today, I ultimately want it to be a conversation. So I'm going to just throw out some ideas, and it's going to be structured off this book. Has anybody read this book, The Five Types of Wealth? Okay. Does anybody follow this Salil Bloom on Twitter or LinkedIn, anything like that? Okay. He's actually a great thought leader. So if you, one thing, if you're on X or Twitter, I'd recommend following him there or watching some of his YouTube content. Very interesting perspective. And this is too, I think one of the realities of our time is that there's so much that's going on when it comes to the topic of building wealth. We want to get clear on what the roadmap looks like. And so we're going to talk about the five types of wealth and really just build a blueprint around this. And the question to think about today is what area, as I go through these five different portions, which one do you feel like you need to really lean into in 2025? So if you were to kind of rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10 as we're going through these, that might be a good exercise to do is just jot that down, either text it to yourself, or if you have something to write on, just rank yourself and say, in this specific category, how well do I think I'm doing on a scale from 1 to 10? And it's going to give you some insight into where you can focus your energy and attention. So let's jump into this. The first one is just this illusion of financial wealth. So how do we typically measure wealth? What's most common? Net worth, income, right? I remember early on when my first job, I was just looking at how much I was making per hour, right? That was my kind of measuring tool. Is I was making $6.55 an hour working at McDonald's, and all my goal was how do I increase that by 25 cents, right? And then at a different stage of life, you start thinking in terms of year. How much income can I make this year? And so your measuring stick kind of adjusts. But yet, if you go and look at people like a Warren Buffett or Elon Musk, how do we typically try to search out their wealth number on Google? What would you put in? Net worth, right? And so my perspective, and I know Gary is pretty big on this, Becca, since you're in the class with Brett Tanner, do you remember what Gary Keller told Brett Tanner when he asked him how consistently he tracks his wealth or his net worth? Okay. He said he's not even in the game if he's not tracking net worth, because ultimately that's showing how you're spending your money and if you're growing your assets, right? Because people can make a ton of money income wise, and they can also spend it all, and so it doesn't actually grow their wealth. So the illusion of financial wealth is that too often people will get stuck in measuring just money because it's actually the easiest thing to measure. And some of the other areas that we're going to go through, it's a little bit harder to create kind of a checks and balances on how can I measure this area of my life. So that's what we're going to get some clarity on today. Peter Drucker, he says what gets measured gets managed. So again, that's just where money is just the easiest thing for us to measure and how we're doing. And the traditional measure of success usually comes down to financial wealth. And so some of these other areas that people often overlook is key. So 5 types of wealth. So this are the 5 things that the wealthy truly prioritize. And if I go back to the event in Canada last week, one of the questions that Tony would ask these individuals, so Steve Forbes, we had the opportunity to listen to Steve Forbes, we had Ray Dalio, we had just a wealth of financial knowledge. And one of the questions that he would always ask them is, what brings you joy? Like after they talked about all these different strategies to building wealth, to safeguarding your wealth, and ultimately becoming more financially free, he asked, well, what brings you joy? And funny enough, none of them talked about making more money. They all related it back to their family. Most of them said their grandkids, all the things that we often don't prescribe as being part of our ecosystem of wealth. And so it's just interesting to hear their perspective on it. Is they have extreme financial freedom, right? Complete financial freedom, yet they actually didn't put that as the number one source of their joy. So financial wealth is money, assets, and financial security. Time wealth is your freedom, your ability to do what brings you joy. Mental health is your intellectual capital and perspective. Social health, or social wealth, excuse me, is your meaningful connections and relationships. And then your physical wealth is your health and energy. So we're going to go through all of these. And again, just rank yourself in 1 to 10 on a scale from 1 to 10 in these different categories. Where are you thriving? And then also, where do you feel like there's some room for improvement? So financial wealth is a tool. It's not the actual end goal. So if you think about what you're ultimately working towards is to be able to get what money affords, right? So that's either more time, more flexibility, more options, right, to do the things that you want to do. And so it starts with income, which is what you earn, and then your assets is phase 2. And this is really this kind of conversation every month. What we want to dive into is how do we grow our assets, and then also how do we protect our assets, right? And so what you own that grows in value or provides you income. So the question is, if you were to look at how you feel like you're doing right now in this category, just rate yourself from a wealth building perspective. How well do you feel like you've done with acquiring assets? And then also, how well have you done with safeguarding your assets? Johnny, one of the things that we kind of talked about at the event is that who started investing in the last 10 years? Okay. So what kind of market have we experienced the last decade? Has it been up only, or has it been a terrible investment market? What has it been like from your guys' experience?
Yeah, lose almost.
Yeah.
It's been up.
Yeah.
From December 2012 to now, it's just,
Yep. It's almost you had to try to lose, right? And my first rental property I bought in 2016, and I can't be naive in thinking that all of the success I've had wealth building wise was just because I made the best decisions ever. A lot of it happens to do with I participated in the best market ever, right? And so we have to be aware of that. And one of the things that we'll dive into is strategically, we're not in the same environment as we were 2020, 2021, 2022 even, or 2016 timeline. We're going into a different kind of market. So we have to be very aware of some of the challenges that we can run into and the shifting tides. One of the things they talked about quite frequently is that we are in the middle of winter, and it can actually last a little bit longer than we might anticipate and get a little worse. And so we have to properly prepare. If you have assets, how do you safeguard those? If you're going to acquire assets, how do you make sure you do it in the smartest way possible so that you don't invest your way out of wealth? Are some big things on the asset play. And then financial security, number 3, this is ultimately what we're investing for, or the purpose of building wealth, which is the ability to say no to the things that don't align with your vision. So too often we are stuck with doing things just because we need the income from doing those things. So how can you get to a place where you can say yes to the things that actually bring you energy, that you enjoy doing, and be able to start saying no to more things? So enough passive income for that reality to take place. Time wealth. This is an interesting little exercise. So this is your most precious resource. Now, Warren Buffett, his net worth is 155 billion. Okay. By raise of hand, if we had a magic wand we can wave, and any of you could replace your life with Warren Buffett's life today, you can get his net worth. How many of you would do it by raise of hand? You have to take his age on as well. So he's 94 years old. So how many of you would trade places with him? You'd have to take on his role. Yep.
McDonald's breakfast sandwich every day. Sounds pretty nice.
McDonald's breakfast sandwich and a Diet Coke every day, right? None of you get to fly in private jets. You probably have a pretty cool network. None of you would trade places. Why? Time. Interesting. So So the interesting perspective is that you already in your mind can say that time is actually more valuable than $155 billion, right? But do we actually treat our time like that? That it's more valuable than money? Not always. So just an interesting thought exercise is how are you spending time and getting a little bit more clarity around that, especially in a day and age where everything, almost everything is strategically curated to steal your time or to grab your attention, right? Has anybody been down a social media rabbit hole before? Or a Gmail inbox, handling emails inbox, where you just go down the rabbit hole of doing other people's tasks and priorities, right? So everything is engineered for that. So we have to be very aware of it and say, well, am I spending time in the way that I actually want to spend time? Because the reality is you actually don't know how much you have left, right? This is actually, let me see if I have a graph. Yeah. So this is actually how Americans spend their time by age. Has anybody seen this diagram before? Yeah. What was that?
These are the age that can't see the screen.
Oh, yeah. And I'll send this out so you can actually see it a little bit closer. But this is this is by age. So you've got age down here at the bottom, and then how many minutes per year. And as you'll see, time spent with coworkers, time with friends, time with children, family, partner, and then time alone. And as you can see, over time, as you age, you spend significantly more time alone, and far less time, as you can see, all these other important categories decline. And this is actually going to be an interesting exercise that I want to go through. John, will you help me pass those out? Thank you. For those of you who are getting some bad eyesight from aging, we made these prints very big for you. So make sure you can all see them. And Cameron, would you see if we have some pens in the back cupboard? We usually have a stack of pens in there. Thank you. Thanks, Becca. So this is just a wealth. This is called the hard reset. This is just for some additional perspective on this time dynamic. So here's some simple instructions for how you're going to do this. Is on the left-hand side, you're going to just write down the name, pick a family member or friend that you feel like you don't see very often, okay? So maybe it's your father, your mother, maybe it's a grandparent, maybe it's a sibling or a friend from the past, and you're going to go ahead and put them on that first line. And then you're going to put how frequently you feel like you see them per year, okay? So once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year, 10 times a year. Yep. Somebody you would want to... So somebody you feel like maybe you don't see them enough, okay? And your age on the left-hand side, and then your friends or family member's age on the right-hand side, okay? And then what you're going to do is you're going to put those two numbers down here. You're actually going to subtract 80, the older person's age, from 80. So 80 minus whatever their age is, and it's going to show you the years remaining. Okay, so as you can see, it's filled out here if you need some clarity on this. So put 80 and then minus their age, and you should come up with the number of years remaining. And then you're going to times that by the number of times you see them per year. So if you see them twice a year and you have 15 years remaining, the number would be 30, right? And you're going to draw that number in the little circle down below. I think your page should have a little circle. Yep. So again, if the person's age, or if you do 80 minus 65 in this case, and they had 15 years remaining, and you times that by 2, it ends up with 30. Okay. So find that number down at the bottom. And this is essentially the number of times that you're going to see this loved one before the end. And this is looking at an average lifespan. Now, the thing to be curious about is saying, are we guaranteed that they're going to live that long? Right? The answer, of course, is no. right? Now, so it's important to note, and I put this at the bottom, that all of these numbers, not all of these numbers are fixed. Okay. Some of them are within your control. Which one is within your control? Yeah. Right.
We go with your graph, it's not gonna be the same of first half,
Mm-hmm.
last half. If it goes down like that, it could be
Mhm.
something less. Tougher.
Yeah. And this is what I'd say is by when you shift your intentionality around this and you realize the limited amount of times you might see somebody, you can change how many times you might see that person. In the book, Salil talks about how when he caught this reality, he ended up relocating closer to his parents. And he's like, I went from maybe having, I think he had 25 times that I would see them. Now I've got a couple hundred times that I'll be able to see them. And so you can, if a person matters to you enough, you're going to engineer a way to be able to see them more frequently. And sometimes it's actually just a convenience factor. It's saying, well, actually my parents live an hour away or they live in the area. I can actually go see them more often if I'm just more purposeful with putting it on my calendar. Because we'll schedule obviously times for business and for travel, things like that. But how often do you schedule time purposefully for the people that you care about that you might not see as often? Mm, totally. Yeah. Yeah. When I knocked doors for quite a while, and the people that were most open to talking were who? Older people. Come on in, right? And it was sad because you could tell that they're just craving connection. They're craving for somebody to be able to chat with and connect to. So definitely something to be aware of is who are those people in your life that might not have as consistently people stopping by and checking in on them or spending time with them. Any other perspectives from this or ahas to go through this exercise, Peter?
I think there's something to be said for when you're in middle age, you've got these connections. If you spend too much time hanging out with coworkers and business associates, no offense, Joel, and not building connections outside of the workplace. Because a lot of our friendships when it comes to work are proximate, like you have friendships by proximity.
Yeah.
But if you're not intentional about building friendships outside of the workplace, that then when you are older, those friendships don't exist.
Mm.
So having, the joke is the real miracle of Jesus was that he was 33 and had 12 close friends. Having those close friendships outside of that.
Yeah.
I think is important.
Yeah.
So that when you're 80, you're all hanging out together.
Mm-hmm.
You'll go live in the same assisted living facility.
Yeah. Jack.
There was a guy that put gumballs into a jar representing how many Saturdays he had left.
Mm.
30 years times 52 weeks a year, or whatever it was. He had 1,500. He says, it will blow your mind how little that looks like. And then when you take a gumball out each Saturday, it's like, crap.
Yeah.
Just think, or how many summers he has left.
Mhm.
30 or 50 or whatever. It's like, that is stark.
Yeah. Doesn't Clay have a visual in his office? Is it weeks of my life or weeks left of my life? And it basically shows a kind of a shaded area of life that he's already lived based off his age today, but then also if he lives to average lifespan, what that would look like.
Very doubtful.
For Clay, yeah. Interesting. Okay, mental wealth. So this is all about your mastering your mind and your perspective, your outlook on life. Your mind is your greatest asset. And the question is, how are you investing into it? So are you being intentional and purposeful about investing into your mindset? One of the when I went to college and just for a semester, and I was going into psychology, and they talked about this idea of neuroplasticity. Does anybody know what that is? Familiar with how that works?
Sure.
So basically, many years ago, 30, 40 years ago, they had this belief that our brains past a certain age are kind of like stagnant. There's no ability to grow, learn, and expand. And I can't remember the timeline. It might have been like 25 or something like that, 26 years old, where they had this idea that beyond that timeline, you've heard the saying, right? It's hard for an old dog to learn new tricks. Okay. And basically what they found over time through actually doing, intense studies is that you do have the ability to actually change the synapses or the connections within your mind. And you can grow and learn and be able to use that to your advantage. And so the kind of three different areas to think about when it comes to this is, one, how are you increasing in your knowledge? So what are you studying to really sharpen your mindset, your perspective? And also broadening your reach of different areas. Maybe you're very equipped when it comes to a knowledge of one specific area of life, right? Or, for example, maybe you've done really well with studying real estate because that's your day-to-day grind. But how well do you feel like you know the components that cause great health? Have you done research on sleep, on dieting, on exercise, on all these other things that actually would improve every other area of your life, right? Or one of the topics we've been talking about recently, AI, right? How are you studying on a consistent basis how AI could be an advantage or a leverage piece for you, right? So you've got to be aware of what are some of those things that I want to study and grow in and become more knowledgeable in those different areas. So continuous learning and skill set development. Number two is clarifying your perspective. So this is just critical thinking and open-mindedness, which is probably one of the lost arts of our time, is just being able to, because again, we have so many things calling for our attention. Do you have time to be able to just sit and think, right? Whether that's journal time, whether that's meditation time, where are you being able to use just thinking time to actually gain more perspective on life? That's one of the reasons I actually love listening to Gary Keller. How many of you were in his 10 bold laws in Family Reunion? For me, like that stuff is so valuable just to hear his perspective or his life kind of philosophy. But you can tell he's a person that thinks about those things, right? And so there's depth when you can clarify your perspective. And then number three is expanding your creativity. So innovation, problem solving abilities. This is, I think, one of the skill sets that actually is going to be the most important over the next 5 years as AI adapts the whole landscape of business. Your ability to be creative with how AI is used, or just creatively think about how you can provide more value to your business, is going to be a huge key. The next one is social wealth. Okay, now this actually kind of ties into that time factor that we talked about, but it's the power of connection. So these are kind of the four different areas that you should really be intentional about improving. So your family relationships, your network, your friends, and your community. And if we go through each of these, your family relationships, this is your first circle of influence. Typically, it's the people that you would spend most time with outside of the workspace, right? And this is the foundation of trust and values. So a lot of times you have the most trust with the people that you've grown up with or your family. And you want to say, well, how can I be very intentional about how I'm growing and pouring energy into those relationships? Your network, some of you may have heard this term, but your network is your net worth, or has the biggest impact on your net worth. And that's a big reason of why we want to do this mastermind each month, is because we're going to be able to collaborate and talk together about different strategies and ways of thinking, or actual tactical strategies to wealth building and investing to make sure that we end up where we want to be down the road. So who's in your inner circle? And that's one of the things that's important, is just this last part, is who you know shapes what you become. So this actually is really tying in everything, but who you know, who you're connected to, who you're spending time with, actually does have a big impact on your perspective, the decisions you make. Your friends, so like-minded people that you enjoy spending time with. Oftentimes too, once you're in kind of business mode and you're trying to crush goals and and focus on achievement, it's easy to neglect some of those relationships of the past that you loved and spent a lot of time with, right? I know for me at least, there's a lot of great friends that I've had over time where we don't see each other as much as I would like, because I'm so busy and focused on like the go, go, go mode, right? And so I have to be a little bit more intentional about that. How can I stage moments where we can get together more often and I can spend time with people who do give me energy, who I really enjoy spending time with? Do anybody feel similar when it comes to business? Do you feel like you don't spend as much time with people that you used to hang out with? Jack?
The challenge, I think, is that there's only so much of you to go around. And so then that walks backwards to the wisdom of spending time in the quiet, because you must prioritize. I've seen on Facebook, like this guy that says, you don't need a morning routine, you know, the most productive people spend 3.5 hours in the morning working like crazy, blah, 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 the most productive, the most productive, the most productive. People that do that, in my experience, burn out, because they're just in go, go, go mode. And so I think spending time in the quiet allows you to prioritize where you go, who you spend time with, what your priorities are, where you're going to locate and live. For all of those reasons, I think these become synergistic in that respect.
Yeah.
Sure.
You want your time, your energy, your love, your whatever it is. And so what happens is that you can't get it quiet enough, and you can't figure out actually where yours is gonna go, where you can deploy your time and energy and love.
That's what I
Hard to say yes to everything. Quiet.
Yeah. 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 It's the reality that when you're saying yes to something, you're automatically saying no to other things, right?
I also think there's something to be said for like, I really value my quiet time.
Mhm.
But I've also learned that sometimes there's things that have to get done. And I'm just gonna choose not to do them alone. So if I'm gonna go grocery shop, I'm gonna take a kid with me.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna take a road trip up to Salt Lake for some whatever business related thing, and I'm not seeing a client, why wouldn't I just take someone with me and we can drive and hang out? You know, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's lots of opportunities to do that and just don't go places alone anymore.
Yeah.
Gary Keller used to, he had a commitment with his kid that he'd go eat lunch with them at elementary school
Yeah.
every single Tuesday or whatever it was. And if someone coincidentally wanted to meet with him at the same time, he's like, great, we're going to lunch. And they'd pull up to the elementary school, and usually the person would be like, what the heck are you doing at the school?
Yeah.
And he'd walk them right in, and they'd sit down with Ellen and have lunch. And it was even a good, like, test almost for, is this the type of person I'm going to bring this in, you know, like how they
Yeah,
react.
I pulled my kid to team lunch with me before.
Yeah,
Pull him out of school and
yeah.
take him with.
My dad was vice president of international sales for Digitech, which was a precursor to Epson. And he was traveling all over the place, and he got called to be the scoutmaster for our local congregation and stuff. And he says, if I'm going to give the attention that I need for these kids, it behooves me to be home. He resigned his position. He said it's the best decision he ever made. Stayed home as a scoutmaster for a decade and stayed home with the kids and bought a business and did that business from home. We had a little cabana we converted to an office. Life changing, not just for him, he would tell you, but certainly for me.
Even at the high level, like I know it's controversial right now saying the word Elon Musk, but like seeing Elon have his little kid in tow wherever he's going right now, you know, or he's sitting in the Oval Office with him on his shoulder. I'm like, it's just cool to kind of like set up.
Yeah.
Standard. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. A few things that come to mind as we talk about this. So one simple perspective that Gary shared last week was what you focus on expands, right? We also have, if we look at the book, The One Thing, they talk about how not all priorities are created equal, right? Let me just go through these three different categories. So you've got what you focus on expands, not all priorities are created equal. And then how many of you are familiar with the jar theory, where you put the big rocks in first, you then put the pebbles, you then put the sand, you then put water, everything fills in properly if you do it in that proper order. Whereas if you try to put the water in first or sand in first, it's a lot harder to fit those big rocks or the things that are most impactful, right? And so in our life, we have to be, let's call it strategic in our approach and saying, well, first, what are my priorities? Meaning when I am 80 or when I am 70, if I look back on life, what things am I actually going to value? or what things am I actually going to say brought me the most joy and the most impact? And then how can I today really engineer my time to where I put the big rocks on my calendar first, right? So the time with family, the time with the people I care about, the time with friends, the vacation time. And knowing that, how many of you are familiar with the idea that work expands the time that we allow, right? And what that means is if we actually have the most important things programmed onto our calendar first as a first base priority, everything else work-wise is going to work its way out. Now, that means we still have to be focused on being more efficient and effective, right? How do I get more results in less time? But what happens is if we just have our work completely, spilling over on our calendar, that's going to take up the majority of our mind share, right, and our focus. And so I think ultimately it is about saying, well, who are the people I want to spend time with? And this question at the end, just who's one person? If you were to just start with one, who's one person that you want to be a little bit more intentional about investing into this year? So what's that one relationship? We did this in the retreat back in November. We came up with a list of 10 people. Who are the 10 people you want to be very strategic on? I want to spend more time with these people. Family members, mentors, people that you want to collaborate with. And so just get purposeful in your approach to building social wealth. Physical wealth. This image is not pulling properly, but this is a triangle or a pyramid. And see if, yep. So energy, my perspective is the real flex. Like I know a lot of people will show off, the fancy house and car and things like that, but I think it's your energy and the energy you're able to bring to the people in life, to the way you show up in business, to all these other areas is so vital in our time. And again, because we're so overwhelmed with all the things we have to do, our big to-do list, and all the things that people are, all the time requests that are coming for us, it is very easy for our energy to be, how many of you have a phone, iPhone or Android? Okay. How many of you have your battery at 100% all the time? No, right? How many of you love those days when you forget to charge your phone and you start the day with 20% on your phone, right?
Those are serial killers.
Yeah, it's Cameron.
Hunter's Tesla is constantly at like 10% charge. How are you driving?
On the head like that.
The reality is too, that's how oftentimes people show up to life, right? We talk about like, you don't want to bring your family your leftovers of whatever energy you have left at the end of the day, right? So what are you doing strategically to ensure that you have the highest amount of energy? Tony Robbins is one of those individuals that I am just like still, Elon Musk as well. I don't know how they do it. I kind of feel like Elon Musk probably is not human. He might be an alien and he's figured out how to hack time completely.
South African.
Is there a trick that you need to teach us?
You know.
So I just want to know what credit is.
But Tony Robbins is a good example where, in these events, he'll go till 1:30, 2 a.m. on a consistent basis, and he's walking around, talking the whole time. And I actually have never seen him take a bathroom break, so I don't know how he does it, but something. But just think about what would you do strategically to increase your energy? And your energy, these different categories are the things that you can really lean into, and it starts with the base of health. How many of you have been sick and you're like, I don't even care about my real estate business. Like, it can completely fold today. I do not care, right? Like, really, nothing else matters if you don't have good health, right? And if we say, well, what are some of the building blocks to maybe protecting our health, but also being able to increase our energy? It starts with sleep. Sleep actually is the #1 performance enhancer. I can't remember if it was, I think it was a last CEO summit, Gary Keller brought in an individual specifically around health. And they talked about how important this is. And there's actually a book called Sleep Smarter. And it goes through some of the strategies to how can you improve your sleep strategically. I know, Johnny, you put me onto this maybe 5 years ago, 4 years ago. the Aura Ring, but being able to track my sleep and see what impacts it in a positive or negative way. So how can you get very tactical on the sleep side so that you are fully energized and ready to rock and roll each day? Your nutrition, so you've got to fuel your body like a high performance machine. So if you had a Ferrari that you're driving, how many of you would put diesel gas into that Ferrari? Or regular oil or gas? No, right? Not smart. You're going to put the highest performance fuel in that vehicle, right? To safeguard that investment that you made. So same thing needs to happen with your bodies. You need to fuel it with the best form of nutrition. And then fitness, that your strength actually impacts your longevity, your ability to perform over an extended period of time. And then number one at the top is your well-being, the ultimate goal, vitality and longevity. And that goes a lot into, meditation, all the practices that you're doing to improve your overall well-being. Any perspective on this area of wealth?
I would say like a year ago. Physically, just after getting in an accident that,
Yeah.
my health changed overnight, nothing I could do about it. I was at that point where like, I don't care about my business, like, for a solid year, I'd go to work and have zero energy, so I hated it. Like, I was like, just gritting through it, right? So I got to a point where I'm like, I'm either gonna change my health habits and get back into shape and take control of this, or I just need to retire because like mentally, I just had enough.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple of things, that I luckily had implemented in my business, because you don't know what's gonna happen with your health. So I would say super important to have good leverage, good strategic business relationships, because I couldn't even physically work for a couple months.
Yeah.
And so had I not kind of implemented those things in advance, not knowing that was going to happen, I could see like that could have been a massive financial hit for me. And then, there really was no amount of wealth that made up for the physical crappy feeling of poor health. So
Yep. Totally.
I would take health over wealth. You can always make
Yeah.
wealth, but
Yeah.
just the way you feel overarching, I would give up money for
Yeah.
health.
Yeah, I think some of my ha's is just around the energy thing. Like so many of my goals have been around weight or like, the gym or body fat or eating or whatever. But I think most of my goals moving forward health wise, like the major goal for me is some sort of energy metric that I'm tracking that's deepening my energy. Like energy runs everything, like even like in a career, like it's the exchange of your energy that is what creates success. Like every emotion, like love comes from energy, charisma comes from energy, like it is energy. So I think actually monitoring energy is an important thing to do. And like clearly a lot of the health gurus, like the more we study sleep, like if they had picked one category, it'd be sleep, like figure out your sleep because it affects everything. I think even, fitness and nutrition, we talk about a lot, but I think a lot of people neglect their mental health, like you're still far more likely to get like Alzheimer's or schizophrenia or something where your brain stops working before even your body does in retirement. So I think paying attention to that is really important. And, he'll probably go through the slides in one of these next two meetings, but we went through the future presentation of just like all the cool stuff that's coming out, where we're at with AI, robots, space. But like biotech and health industry, it is so cool. Like what is like almost right there, we're flying down in May to go to Tony Robbins' like super clinic. It's like basically a very preventative thing. It's very expensive, but it's like it scans you every way possible and then it throws it in their AI. And it's pre-diagnosing things. It's like helping you understand your DNA and it fully maps your genome sequencing and stuff like that. So there's a lot of high-tech stuff, but the biggest aha from this event when we got on the healthcare category is expand your perspective on what you want your lifespan to be. Like a lot of us like, oh, if we live to 100, you know, he's like, you need to probably start thinking more like 200 or 300, just where we're at with health. And one of the bold claims that he says, like, all you have to do is just make it 10 years. Somehow just live for 10 more years. Don't die, be generally healthy, don't get in an accident, because every year after 10 years that you live, you'll be able to add a year and a half to your lifespan. So we'll actually be able to like lengthen our life just with some of that technology. So part of it is just, I think you still gotta have the base foundation, but it's also a great category to pay attention to what's going on in the world right now. It's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Josh and then Jack.
Peter Diamandis, was he?
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so you guys want a good book, this was recommended by Shoni, I think, or maybe you were talking about it last year. I went and read the book Longevity.
Yep.
Amazing book, and it's like short. I mean, we're talking, I read this in 4 hours, right? I sat down on a Sunday, I read it one evening when all the kids were sleeping. Just phenomenal book. And I think the biggest thing with a lot of this is I can learn not just like, oh, I want to lose weight, not just a goal on nutrition, fitness, or sleep or health. It's like a goal that's specifically tied to it. But if we understand why it is we do what we do, that changes our mind. You were talking about it very beginning, the psychology, right? The neuroplasticity technique.
Yeah.
If we read books like Sleep Smarter, you recommend it, I'm gonna go read that. But Longevity, that changed my idea of what health actually is. Like, I don't need to lose weight. You can look at me and be like, I need to gain weight, right? But the health side of it, the benefits of eating healthy are so much broader and so much more than just, oh, I want to eat healthy. And so Peter Diamandis talks about this in his book, and he talks about sleeping too. And it's so fascinating, all the things he discusses.
Yeah.
And I think that really, if we understand wealth, right? Period, if we research it more and we mastermind with each other and learn more about wealth just in general, that will help change our mindset, which will then fuel where our actions go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the other good book is Comfort Crisis, if you haven't read that.
I read that one.
That's just like our obsession with just making our life more comfortable has been working against us, you know?
But like, around our health, it's like, well, that's great, but at what point should we own our health?
Yeah,
It's hard.
yeah.
It's great to have support system. It's like, knock it off, like, I know it's not.
If I can take a pill and get six-pack back, I'm fine with that too.
Jack
There was a-
and the James.
A book famous from years ago called Body for Life. And there was a quote in there that just hit me so hard. Fitness does not just change the way that you look. It changes the way that you see. And I totally agree with that. This gentleman, I don't know his name, about the car accident. I got in a car accident 5 years ago and had to go visit a neuropsychologist to, figure out my brain's whack. And he sent me through a battery of tests, about 4 hours, and he says, I'm gonna tell you this, you have an exceptional mind. I'll go beyond that. He actually used the words, he says, you have a Ferrari of a mind. And then he said, the problem is that you are trying to drive your Ferrari using diesel fuel. And he talked about protecting my sleep. Grounding was an absolute huge one. He said, do not go to bed exhausted. You have what is called cognitive fatigue. And if you go to your limit and then push through it, you will never recover. And so it becomes this point of becoming aware of what you need and then caring enough to give it to yourself. And man, start with baby steps, but there's another quote that says, nothing changes if nothing changes.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I want to just tie this, I want to make this connection. Like, why is this? We're here to talk about wealth and we're talking about energy and health, right? Here's the connection. How many of you have gotten home at the end of the day and you're like, I don't want to do anything. Like, I just want to sit on the couch and like watch Netflix and hang out the rest of the evening, right? We've all been there. How many of you on a weekend, Saturday or Sunday, you know what? I had a really long week. I'm going to just take it easy. How many of you have been there, right? So just think through this. Your energy actually impacts your decisions, right? So if your energy is at a higher level, you now have more time, more energy to say, you know what, I can actually read that book on multifamily investing, or I actually do have the time to study private equity, or I do have one of the key themes of, for those of you who didn't hear our talk last year, when we came back from this event, it's the same conversation as last year. They said diversification is the ultimate key to long-term wealth. They said go all in on one thing up front, but to build your wealth. So concentration to build wealth, diversification to protect your wealth. That was kind of the general theme. And what Tony and Ray Dalio talked about was that you need to have 8 to 10 uncorrelated assets. Uncorrelated means they don't move in unison. A better example of uncorrelated assets would be, let's just imagine that you opened a business, you worked on in a vacation destination, let's say Florida, and you're working on the beach selling sunscreen, okay? That's probably a good business model during the summer, right? But what happens when it's raining outside? How much sunscreen are you going to sell that day? Probably none, right? Now, what if you choose to stock your car with umbrellas at the same time? And you say, depending on whatever weather it is, I'm going to pull out one of these two products to sell. How many days, no matter if it's raining or sunny, how many days are you going to sell the two different products? Almost all the time, right? So that's a way to diversify and ensure that you're protecting your income. So same thing when it comes to investing is, Tony said you have to have 8 to 10 uncorrelated assets, meaning they don't move in unison. And when you do that, it reduces your risk. This is crazy. It reduces your risk by 80%. Okay. And so the question is, if I were to say, how many of you know 8 to 10, that you can write them down right now, 8 to 10 different asset classes, and you actually understand how to invest in those different asset classes? How many feel that you're in a good position to do that? Okay. Now, the only way to find that information is what? Study it. But the only way to study it is to have enough energy after all the other things that you're doing. Family time, work time, friends time, gym time, all those other things. So that's why energy is such an important part of the equation, is because if, again, you don't have the energy to study it, to watch that YouTube video, or to read that book, how are you going to improve your wealth long term? Okay. There's even been some times where I'm like, man, I don't know if I want to go to this networking event, real estate investment, UV-RIA. They do their events at like 7 o'clock at night, 7 to 9, which I went and saw Becca's talk last month. It was phenomenal. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that late at night. It's been a long week, right? So again, you have to focus intentionally about the energy to be able to do and focus on those teams. Okay, we're going to move to the last part. So again, all of these things are interconnected. They all impact and improve one another. You want to focus on having a well-rounded wealth plan, which includes all 5. Next Wealth Mastermind on the 26th of March is where we're going to go deep on our actual takeaways from the Tony event. So that would be a great one to be here, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. That's going to be all about financial wealth. Okay, so we're going to hit deep on that one. Now, just really quick, I want you to flip over that paper you have and just write down some of these answers. So which type of wealth do you feel like, and don't, not necessarily across the room, but just for yourself, which area of wealth do you feel like is most neglected in your life? Out of the 5 that we went through, which one do you feel like is most neglected? And then what is one action you feel like you can take going out of this? So I'm going to go back to this so you can see them. So which one of these do you feel like is the most neglected in your life? And what's the one action that you can take from all of this? And then lastly, just write down an aha. What was the big one takeaway that you're going to walk out of this room with and say that was well worth the investment of time, and that's going to be very helpful for me in building my areas of wealth in 2025. Just take a second to write those down. Which area is most neglected? What's the one action item and the big aha, the big idea that you're walking out of here with? And everybody for me, please stand up really quick. Just find a person, and you're going to just share those 3 things. So go ahead and find a person near you, share those three things. Most neglected area of life. Action item in AHA.
Inflammation and all that, so.
I'm reading that sleep hygiene book. So I can get out to reviews. Like, what sleeping is. Sleep are, and, you know,
Go ahead and switch if you haven't. Go ahead and switch if you have not.
I've got to invest more in my kiddos. I've got to.
All right, let's go ahead and bring it back in. Let's wrap up the conversations. All right, 10 seconds. Let's bring it back in. All right. So to wrap this up, what I would like to do is just go ahead and get 3 or 4 ahas, some of the things that you guys just talked about. What came through for you in these conversations? Either an area of life that you feel like you need some improvement on, area of opportunity, or just a general aha takeaway from today. And you can tattletale on one of your partners that you just heard their takeaway or aha.
Well, I'm a chronic over participator, so I'll go. My aha was my time is precious. If I'm not gonna trade my time, or time left, you know, for $155 billion, then what the freak am I doing?
Yeah.
And so, in my business, I do a lot of B, C, and D tasks that I should be focusing on A. Delegate, hire that out. The thought being that if I want to make $1 million and I have 2,080 work hours in a 40-hour work week per year, then my time has got to be worth $500 an hour. And so if for 20 bucks an hour, I can hire somebody to do 80% of what's on my plate, what am I doing? So I'm going to buy back my time.
Awesome. Love it. So there's a good book about that. Buy back your time. It's actually named that. So thanks, Jack. James.
I need to be as studious as I am in like school, because I'm also a student right now too, and selling real estate, so it can be kind of fighting 2 bullets at the same time.
Yeah.
But I think I'm not studying like health, nutrition things, and then I'm always like, it's almost like I'm self-complaining in my own head of like, I'm so tired.
Yeah.
Or I'll drink an energy drink and I'll be like, it's like I'm dragging.
Yep.
And there's this additional drag that I'm not ever addressing, and it compounds, and I notice that, and then I do have to take a major vacation to reset.
Yeah.
When it should be a little bit more of like, I'm plugging in essence, I'm the phone, charging in every night, not just running at 20%. And whether that's building a community around that to kind of hold me accountable to be like, okay, I'm not
drinking energy drinks and going to bed at a good hour, going to the gym. I think that stuff is really valuable and I
Yeah.
overlook it very often.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Angie.
My on-call was, I did pretty good with the during the week. It's super low on the weekend, but on Friday night, I'm like,
Yeah. Mm. Yeah.
that's my Friday night meal, there's my energy.
Cool. Love that. That's a great one. We'll do one more and we'll wrap up.
Schedule dates with my kids.
Cool. Yeah. Schedule dates with your kids. Ultimately, that's what we're going to remember later on, right? Awesome. Well, I appreciate you all for coming. Again, this was by design. We wanted to talk a little bit more about the foundation. Next time is going to be far more tactical, strategy driven around wealth building topics. This is, again, I actually think very strategic as well, because again, the reality is that I think this has a big impact. Your mindset, your way of strategizing around your health, your energy does impact your ability to create financial wealth. So, but next time we'll be talking about financial freedom and how do you build a structure or a setup to earning enough passive income that it pays for your lifestyle. And in our top takeaways from the Platinum event with Tony Robbins. So that will be the next session. And until then, we'll see you guys. Thank you.